Welcome to Because We Love You, a podcast dedicated to helping you live a life of wellness. My name is Stacy, and I'm here with my co-host, Jade.
Hello. This week we are talking not just about conflict, but how to do it better. So check out the show notes for more information.
And as always, you're welcome to follow us on Instagram or Facebook, and you can listen on Apple Podcast or Spotify.
So this week we are talking about how to fight better, right? How to engage in this so positive conflict that we talked about last week. Did last week change your ideas of conflict, Stacy?
It did. I've been constantly in my mind telling myself, conflict can be good. Conflict is caring. Conflict can be beautiful.
Jade disagreed with me because she cares.
She loves me. That's why. Yeah. So there you go. I'm working on it. I am. Work in progress.
Yeah. So I have a confession.
Yeah.
I have not always engaged in conflict the best way. I know.
I'm so surprised.
Are you shocked? Honestly, I'm even like a little like, oh man, I don't want to share that story because it's so immature. And it happened 13 years ago, but I just feel like it was a great display of how not to engage in conflict, right? And so you already know the story, but for all you viewers and listeners,
confession time.
When I was very young and very naive and just passionate, but I couldn't control this passion.
Yeah.
I was playing a game of ultimate frisbee at a church event, which makes this even worse.
Yeah.
And I've always been like in leadership in the church and supposed to be someone that people look up to. And playing this game, and there was some physical conflict that had started to occur. We were playing ultimate frisbee, and if you've never played ultimate frisbee, you're supposed to stand like an arm's distance from the person who has the frisbee, and they are able to kind of move their hands or whatever and kind of shoo you out of the way while you're trying to guard them. Well, this particular incident, the person that I'm speaking of kind of got a little too close and started using the frisbee to kind of swat at my breast tissue and or boobs. And I just perceived that. Obviously, I'm competitive, so maybe that had something to do with it. And I just was like, And then there was some wordage that went on that kind of fueled my conflict fire. And so with the wordage and with the slappage of the breast tissue, I got so heated that instead of walking away, instead of trying to engage in conflict, instead of switching partners.
Are you ready? What happened, Jade?
Punched her in the face.
Punch. Physical harm.
It was not right.
It
did feel good at the time. And I then had to walk off the court because I knew it was wrong initially. Small group leader, influential Jade. Oh.
Punches people in the face.
Whoa!
When she gets mad.
And so I had to walk off. And I will say that I did ask her for forgiveness, and I went to her and I made things right. And we are still in good conversation. And my reputation was not ruined over this. But sometimes when we engage the wrong way in conflict, we ruin things. Right?
To be clear, if you ever punch me in the face, I would have a very hard time forgiving you, so I'm gonna set that boundary right now. Can you not do that?
I mean, I'll try not to. Well, okay, as being mad.
I mean, when would you punch me in the face for feeling happy?
No, I thought that I had hit you or something. I kicked you in the nose one time.
Well, that was in the middle of an aggressive basketball game.
You forgave me for that.
I
But I
do.
mean, I did get too heated. I could have and remember when I drop kicked my other friend, like I jumped into the pool because she had the ball. And see, that was wrong too. I could have. So that's what I'm saying. Like, can you forgive me if I have like a lot of adrenaline? Like, if you see that I'm overworked, I'm not in my right mind. You've seen it. Your daughter gets like that.
She does.
And we don't like, once that like adrenaline hits a certain level, I'm not responsible for my actions completely.
Well,
I just have to make sure okay, this is
we're working through some things here publicly on this podcast right now. Maybe we need to talk to a therapist about this, but
basically,
point is, we can do conflict.
We can do
the wrong
conflict,
way.
and we could do it better. And I think that's why so many people avoid it, is because they're the fear of, oh, this is going to go really badly. Yeah. And so then the opposite of engaging in conflict is avoidance, right?
Yeah, and I think a lot of people do that. I do that, as I talked about last week. And interestingly, this week I was reading an article in NPR by John Burnett, and he was talking about this trend that we're seeing, and it's happened before historically. But people are moving to locations, so changing their geographical locations where they live so that they live by people who share their political beliefs. So red areas are getting redder, blue areas are getting bluer. And when we think about these divisive, you hear this all the time, like the world is as divisive as ever, and there's just so much conflict. Maybe if we were better at discussing it, passionately discussing, as we call it, or engaging in conversation, engaging in conflict with people who do not believe the same things that we believe, I think we would be better off than doing this thing where we'll I'm just going to go then and be around people and join groups and live in a place where people think like I do. And that feels good. Of course it does, right? That feels good. But
a bunch of cheerleaders, and nobody to spawn you and to disagree with you. And isn't that like, I think even those same people would say, we don't teach our kids to run away from problems. We teach them to tackle them head on. Yeah. No. And then you buy a mansion in Texas because you want to get away from everything. Yeah. That does make me angry. We don't need to avoid. And that's I think that's the purpose of this whole talk is, Stacy, if we can avoid,
right,
but we don't want to do conflict so badly that we destroy relationships and that we don't get anywhere, because conflict done badly does not bring us any resolution. So how do we engage? How do we fight the good fight?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're much better at this than I am. What do you have things that you've...
I have
Let's
things.
hear it. Give me some advice, girl.
I have all the things. I think the first thing I would say is recognizing that this is hard. This is a hard thing. It is not easy. Even for me that kind of likes it a little bit, it's still hard. Like, I'm like, oh, I don't want to do it because there's so much involved. Yeah. And like sometimes the tasks that we're trying to, the conflict that we're trying to bring resolution to, or a better idea, or to make better, is so big and so elusive that it's like, how are we ever going to fix this problem? But I think it starts by maybe even saying before you have a hard conversation, like, this is a hard conversation, but I don't necessarily agree with X, Y, and Z. Can we talk about it? I'd like to hear like why you came up with that conclusion, or why do you think that's the best way to fight this problem? And I think maybe it would change, kind of whenever I walk into an exam room, we're taught to problem set. So you don't just go in and say, what do you need to talk about? Right. No, it's like, I've heard you've told the nurse that you have these 3 things that you need to talk about. Let's start with this. So you kind of like, you problem set the conversation and recognize that this is hard and that we may not have a black and white answer. Yeah. Like, conflict is not always about getting the right answer the first time either, Maybe it's a series of conversations that you've got to be willing to have, and to take one piece from you, one piece from me, and us work at it. But I think so often it's like, we want to sit down for 15 minutes, get the answer, check it off, and that's not so easily done.
Yeah, and I would think that would make people go into a conversation and be more open-minded about what they can learn from it, rather than like thinking, okay, she's just trying to get me to believe what she believes, or we're trying to fix this problem or solve it in this single conversation. And I think when you set the expectation up front that, hey, this is going to be tough, we may feel bad at certain points, and we may not actually even come to any type of agreement or to a solution today, it seems like that would that seems to make sense.
I think
It's
by
good advice, Jade.
recognizing it's hard to, but knowing that you're going to hear them, you're going to listen to what they have to say. Like you want to. I think in any good conflict, you want to hear what the other person says because you don't have it all figured out as much as you think, as much as I think. I don't have it all figured out. And I have to tell myself, like, there's more people's minds. There's more of goodness of other people that we can all critique and make this kind of the best. Laying down our pride, recognizing other people have something to bring to the table, and it's going to be hard, right? What about you, Stacy? What is one tip for a good fight?
I had to do a little more research because I suck at conflict and so I don't have as much experience. But I listened to a TED Talk this week by a person named Claire Canfield, and he's at Utah State. A degree in communication studies, and he has this acronym, and I would encourage you to listen to it. It's about, his TED Talks about how conflict can be beautiful or viewing it as beautiful. He has an acronym, vocab, and each letter stands for, of course, one aspect of conflict. And the one that I connected to was vulnerability. The recommendation that in the midst of conflict, if we're doing it, especially in relationship, right, which we should be, you have to be vulnerable. You have to say what you really think, what you really feel. And I think if we practice doing that regularly, we can avoid those moments, because this has happened to me where things just build and build and build and build. And then I, get angry, or my default is to cry. And so, but if we practice being vulnerable, saying what you feel, saying what you think, rather than holding it all in, being yourself, being true to those things. Don't just agree when you have something else to say when you disagree. That was helpful for me.
I think, when vulnerability is having confidence that you matter, your ideas matter, your experiences matter, and your voice matters. You have a voice, and that it matters, but it may not be the only voice, right? And so that's where this vulnerability, but if you're not willing to share it, if you're not willing to share how something makes you feel, or that other perspective, I think we've had conversations all the time where, I will share something, but then you'll give this whole different, like, well, this would make me feel, well, it doesn't make me feel like that at all, but it made you feel X, Y, and Z. And when I hear that, I'm like, I have empathy for that. I have like, wow, one, you're being very vulnerable to share that, like that information. But two, it makes me, I can see how you would perceive if we go this route with our group, our small group, our kids, our family vacation. This is going to hurt a lot of people. And so you being confident enough to say, you matter enough. And hopefully what you're fighting for matters enough to be vulnerable.
Yeah. I think, it goes back to, we talk so much about building healthy communities and healthy friend groups and healthy marriages. And I think, we can only be vulnerable when we feel safe enough to do that. So not only, encouraging ourselves, encouraging you all to be vulnerable, but be a safe space, right? Where other people can be vulnerable with you. If people are never vulnerable with you, if people never share anything, if people never, talk to you about serious stuff, maybe you need to look inside and think, am I being vulnerable also? And am I a safe space for people?
But important to note that when you are vulnerable and when you are engaging in these conflicting conversations, you still may hear things that make you feel a certain way. I mean, they should come out of love,
of course,
but like, this is not going to be, oh yeah, I know why you feel that way. Maybe it is, I understand you feel this way, but the reality is that this is where that person was coming from. It was not to shatter you, or, I know you feel that way, but we still had to make this decision for this group or whatnot. And so it's just like, you got to be willing to do that so things can change, but you got to be willing to like,
hear it.
It's both sides. So create a safe place, but just because somebody disagrees with you doesn't mean it's not a safe place.
Yeah. Like we talked about last week too, it could be a sign of caring, right? And so,
So defining your safe place, the safe place is where you're heard and you're valued and you're respected
And
You
where
don't
you
need
can
to
hear
be,
hard
yeah,
things.
but you hear hard.
Yeah.
You hear hard things, and you don't have to take all of them. I mean,
Sure.
I encourage everybody when people say something or come against you or give you that nugget that you're like, oh, I mean, dwell on that, think about that, pray about that. Ask some other people in your life, do you see that? And I think that you should see confirmation that like it's across the board and not just one person. I mean, I've been told before that because I play with people's hair, I'm fake and that I don't really love to, you know what I'm saying? And you can't take that. That's the conflict that is not received because it's not. So, always dwell on what people say. And I think that you can get confirmation in other ways when it's the truth that you need to hear.
Absolutely.
Yep. What is your next one? What would be the third thing that we need to have in order to fight the good fight?
Active listening, right? Just being a good communicator. And that involves a lot of different things. Every person you ask, we read a ton of, research articles on this, and everyone, defines it differently. But some of the things that kept coming up were things, they're kind of the obvious things, like look at people, for goodness sake, right? Like look in their face,
don't be on your phone.
Yeah, give them affirming sounds and gestures that, show you're listening. But more important than that, I think some interesting advice I heard actually from someone who does marriage counseling at their church this week was to repeat back what the person is saying or what you heard from that person. Yeah, because
to make sure your interpretation is actually what they're saying.
Yeah, because I think a lot of times we, kind of default to taking things in a relational way, as we talked about, taking it personally. And so if you repeat back, so I'm hearing you say, or, I think what you're saying is this, then we can make sure that, you are saying what you want to say and I'm hearing it in the way that it was meant.
Yeah. I like that. And it shows you're listening. It shows that you are actively listening and that you're trying to understand. I think that's important to be heard and then understood. I think another part of active listening is actually taking maybe some steps to see if that really will work. Because, I mean, we're talking about task conflict a lot. And, you have a thing that you're trying to solve. So if somebody has this idea, no matter how big it is, or maybe you don't even see it coming to pass, you're like, that is not going to happen. Or maybe you don't even agree with it, but there's nothing invertly wrong. And you're like, oh yeah, if we had $1 million, that would be an awesome idea. But to take that first step, say, I don't know how this is going to work out, but you really feel this passionately about it. So let's do X, Y, and Z to see if it happens. And I have found, like, when I'm trying to move towards a goal, when you make the X, Y, and Z, and then maybe it doesn't happen, the person is not like, she never listened to me. She doesn't listen to my ideas. I can't believe it. She's like, no, she tried everything to make that idea happen. And now I see that it's just too big for right now, or we can't make that happen, or we don't have the resources. I think that's some of the best active listening is let's try it,
That's good. For sure. I want to loop back to, the TED Talk that I was mentioning a second ago to end with this. I think one final thing is to make sure that you have boundaries for conflict. And, I think you and I would think about boundaries in different ways because of, the way we are, the way we view conflict, different things like that. But, he talks about the importance of having boundaries up front. And maybe this is at the beginning of the conversation. I think this could be important in many instances to communicate what your boundaries are. So, we are not going to yell at each other. It just reminds me of, I was in a meeting once at work. It was, virtual. It was several people there, several people above me. And a colleague started yelling about a situation that had nothing, it wasn't necessarily directed at me, but about a situation that I'm involved in, and started yelling right at us for something we didn't do. So it was something that, someone that was there before. But, in that moment, I set a boundary. Like, like I'm an adult in a workplace, and I will not sit in a meeting where someone in a disrespectful way, right, is yelling.
Yeah. Sounded like that was more relational to, like, more
well, I
people,
took it relational.
people to people.
And it might have been task for that person. That's probably, maybe they viewed it that way. So it could be a miscommunication in that. But I think, for me, that's just a boundary that I've had to set. Like, I can't handle that.
Yep. And I think that it's important to note that we do all have different boundaries, but we have to respect others. And so maybe you engage in conflict differently with different people, because it does remind me of the story of the Wright brothers, where the people heard them actually fighting and yelling and screaming, and they weren't really mad, but that was just their intensity talking, and they were just like so frustrated. And so some people can tend to go to more the boisterous type.
Yeah.
Not that it's right, but that you've got to know your audience. Like, he knew he could talk to his brother that way.
Yeah.
And I know actually I can talk to my mom that way.
Yeah.
Like, we get kind of aggressive and heated and we really do that. But I also know I can't talk to you that way.
Yeah.
And that if I start to go that way with you, it's not going to end well. So different people, the boundaries of different people, because I don't want somebody out there to think, oh, it's wrong, or that somebody thinks it's right, because it's not wrong or right.
Yeah.
But you are going to shut down. Yeah. If somebody's yelling at you.
Yeah. And it's interesting. We talked last week about kind of our marriages and how, from the outside, sometimes people look at your marriage in the way, like, you engage in conflict, which can be very verbal and passionate and it's outward, it's visible. And then I think when people look at my marriage from the outside, sometimes it looks more peaceful, as we talked about, but we're engaging in just as much conflict as you and your husband, but we have different boundaries, right? Like, you guys are okay and can be fine with that visible back and forth. In my marriage, we've had to set boundaries of how and when we fight. Like, in the moment, if we were to start going at it, like, saying things back and forth, it is not healthy. We know that I shut down. We know that, my husband used to have a temper. And so that's always been his boundary. Like, if things get heated, we need to separate for a while and not talk about it. And it's not pushing it down and never dealing with it. It's just that we can't do that in that moment. That's a boundary we have. But we know that in 3 or 4 hours, we are going to talk about it, right? And we're going to come back once emotions have calmed down a little bit, and I'm not being as sensitive and he's not mad, and we're still sensitive and mad, but you know what I mean? Like, things have tampered down a little bit, and we can then sit and have, a productive conversation about it. Yeah. And so I like that point that, conflict looks different. Our boundaries are different. Yeah. We have to set our boundaries for conflict, and we have to communicate them. Yeah. It's at least with the people we love.
And that's respect, and I think that, that's respect in boundaries, and we should have that. And if you're engaging in conflict with someone and you don't know their boundaries, you could probably sense some of them, but you don't, have that conversation. Like, what is too far? Does it bother you when I get a little passionate in my discussion? Is this something, because sometimes I can even go too far for my husband. He's understood it now, and he knows that it's like more intensity than it is madness. It's like, I'm not mad, I'm intense. Things like that. But I loved a study that was done, and Adam Grant references in his book, because I think so often, and maybe we should talk to our kids, because they've seen conflict in different ways. Yeah. But we think that conflict is so negatively affects our children. Yep. And I loved that it's not conflict that negatively affects our children. Conflict actually can improve our child's confidence. They know their stability, their confidence in the world to share their opinion and to work through things, and their problem solving skills, because they have seen it in their home life, and they know that, like, one fight, one conflict doesn't mean it's gone. Yeah. We don't have to be friends anymore, whatnot. It just means we got to work at this. We've got to make compromise, things like that. But the caveat is, when done with respect.
Yeah.
When done with boundaries. Because if we are, throwing the F-bomb around the house and we're threatening to leave, this is marriage-wise, but even in other conflicts, if we're like, well, he always picks the restaurant, I don't mean, whatever your conflict is, if it's financial, but if it's done not respectfully, it does actually have a negative impact on their life. But it's reassuring that it also has a positive. Our kids need to see that we can work through things, that we can be a little irritated with somebody or not agree.
Yeah, and do it respectfully.
But still work through it.
Yeah,
what an
that's
awesome
really good
skill set.
And that's another way to help us think about conflict in a beneficial way or positive light is we can model conflict in a healthy way, and our kids actually probably need to see that so that as they grow up, they know how to set their own boundaries, how to communicate their boundaries, how to disagree with someone, but in a way that's appropriate and loving and can actually lead to change.
And don't they learn most of this by just us modeling it?
Absolutely,
we don't sit down.
Watching.
We're not sitting down with our kids and going through 4 points of conflict with them.
What are your boundaries on
Although
conflict?
I have caught our kids listening to their YouTube channel, so maybe they are picking up some of this.
Yeah.
But it's by our modeling, and that I think that's my inspiration to be better, to do better. Is my prayer for my kids is that they're a part of the solution, not the problem. That
great.
Our kids learn how to bring people together, not be, they're stand strong in what they believe, but to hear people out and along the way. Going back to the Wright brothers, which I mean, I guess it's because they flew their first plane in North Carolina. Come on, raise up. And I really wanted to go hand gliding off that cliff when we were there. But there was a lot going on. We had babies. Yeah. Remember?
Yes,
and I was like, I really want to do this, but it was too much. We had to go back and feel the sand beneath our toes that the Wright brothers did all of these amazing things with. But I just want to leave everybody with this, and I want us to talk about it for just a minute. One of the big things that the Wright brothers did so well was, instead of always trying to defend their conflict, why don't you agree with me? Why would you not want to do it this way? They looked at the problem and they started asking how. How does this work? How would your idea work? You think we need this? Well, what's going on? With the propeller. And they were so stuck on one propeller. They thought a plane only needed one propeller. That's what they were stuck on. Yeah. And it wasn't until they kept trying to defend their whys, and they said in the article and in the book, it said they spent so many months defending their why. But when they really started looking at their how does this benefit the plane? How would this work? That they realized they didn't need one propeller. They needed two propellers. And they needed two propellers rotating in opposite directions for it to fly. And it was then, when they asked the how, that they were able to fly a plane and get us to Bora Bora one day.
One day.
We'll be
there.
So,
thank goodness
task conflict.
Yeah, right back. That's what I was thinking the whole time you're talking, is right back to task conflict. Focus on process, focus on how.
The plane's already been invented, Stacy, but there's something else for us.
The next thing.
Yeah, for us to give to this world. There's something else for you guys to give to this world. You just need that person in your life, or a few people in your life that are willing to give you that feedback and just say, hey, but how? And look, we'll be flying one day.
There you go.
We already are.
There you go. So, hopefully this has been helpful in terms of thinking about how to fight better.
I hope you enjoyed it as much as I have.
It's been a real exciting one for you. I'm still kind of sweaty and nervous about this, but we'll keep working. So, fight fair, fight better, but fight this week, right?
Yeah, the good fight. The good fight. Know what you're fighting for. There's always a cost to your fight. But know that if it's worth it, it's worth a little bit of disagreement to fly.
Why, Jade?
Because we love you.